Hey, all, welcome to episode 4 of Dirty Basement Terrain. This episode, we're doing summoning tiles. What's special about this tile? On its own, nothing. It looks cool, but other than that, nothing all that special about it. Until you bring the other one in with the summoned creatures or tentacles or whatever you want to do. So, I'm going to show you the process of how I went from this to this. I'm not saying you should do it exactly the way I'm doing it. I'm just showing you how I did it.
Okay, for this I am going to be using my Proxxon along with my shifting landscape cutter, and I'm going to be using the hexagon attachment. You can use whatever you want. And is this step possible to do without this tools? Yeah, it is possible, but this just makes it a lot more simpler and easier. I am cutting for approximately 4-inch or 100 millimeter across hexagon on this step, so. Okay, now that we've got our hexagon shape cut out, we need to actually slice up some thin slices. Now these initial slices are going to be 1/4 of an inch thick. And it's pretty simple. I'm using, of course, my Proxxon and my Guider Pro from Shifting Lands. And I said, I just need to cut 4 total slices for what I've got planned at 1/4 inch thick. Now that I've got my 1/4 inch thick bases done, I need to adjust the Guider Pro for 1/8 of an inch for the second part. These are just my choice for thicknesses. You can go with your own thicknesses if you want. And I need to cut 4 total for the 1/8 of an inch part. And make this last cut here, and you'll see that I've got 4 total for the 1/8 of an inch thick, and I also have 4 total for the 1/4 of an inch thick. Now in this I'm only going to be using 2 of each. And now I'm going to shave off 1/4 of an inch off of each side of the 1/8 inch thick pieces. Now save those offcuts because they can and will be useful further down the road for another project. Now we're going to do the texturing of the foam, and we're going to be using the old standby of the foil ball technique. It's simple, it's easy, and it works. And for this, it's the perfect way to get this XPS textured. that we've got all of our foam textured, we're going to do, obviously, the gluing part. I'm using some PVA wood glue here. And as per usual, when I got a section like this, I like to brush it on. It's just my preference. I've seen other people pour it directly on the foam, then smear it out, but I just prefer brushing. It's just me. And I want to get a nice, even, thick coat. Or not even a thick coat, but a decent coat to cover everything. And once I got that, take one of the bigger pieces and attach them. Try and get it somewhat even. Just eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And press it down, and we're good to go. Now, while I have 4 done here, I only need 2. The other 2 are for a future project. Now for this, I'm going to be carving in some magical lines, make it look kind of like some kind of summoning magic hoobajoob. You don't want to go too complicated with your symbols here, because you are going to have to try and get close to exact copy on the second one, because one is supposed to be pre-summoning, the other is supposed to be post-summoning. So they're both supposed to be the same tile, so you want to try and keep it as close to each other as you possibly can. Okay, this part I am using Final Fashion from the Dollar Tree tentacle packs. You could use like octopus tentacles, or you can make your own, which I sometimes or more often do. But for this, I felt like using some toys. Now, of course, they're large chunks, so I'm going to have to get a bunch of cutting tools out, and I want to chop them up so I have individual tentacles and not just one big clump of tentacles. Though that would look cool too, though. Okay, now that I've got all my tentacles chopped up and ready to go, it's time to actually start attaching tentacles to the summoning platform thingamabob. But first I'm going to grab a chunk of green stuff, because it's my preferred material to when I have to sculpt something, even if it's something as simple as what you're going to see. It gives me a little bit of work time, and then it hardens pretty well. But as you can see, most people know this already, but I'm stating it anyway. You have to mix it up into a good, even green color consistency, or otherwise it just won't cure right. And you definitely don't want that. Okay, now that I've got all the green stuff mixed up, it's time to actually pick and where these tentacles go. Now, I'm not going to be adding all these tentacles to these, but I'm only going to be adding 4, but you can add as many or as few as you want. I'm taking one of the tentacles and then pushing it into the XPS to leave an impression of where it's going to go. Do you have to do this? No, but I would strongly suggest that you do it, because it'll actually help in the long run for placement and then for its durability if you do this. Now that I've got the hole done, I'm grabbing some of my wood glue and filling the hole up. Don't worry, the wood glue is not what's going to hold this thing in place the whole time. It's going to be the green stuff. I just want to take a small strip of green stuff and place it around the base of the tentacle, and then just kind of mush it down a little bit, spread it out, push it up against the tentacle and the foam. Now I'm going to be grabbing a couple of my oh so wonderful Dollar Tree sculpting tools. Hey, they may come from the Dollar Tree, but they work. I think this one I actually got from the craft section. Most of my stuff comes from the Dollar Tree, so it's not like I'm spending a lot on tools. I'm just trying to sculpt several lines and kind of like, I don't know, like maybe a magical aura or something where it's coming out of the stone. I don't know what I was really trying to do here, but I think in the end it looks cool. And for me, that's all that I really cared about. Now, the lines that I sculpted in wound up being a little too pronounced for what I wanted, so I'm going to be grabbing some of my homemade texture paste and I'm going to be brushing it over top of the sculpted area. It's at the base of the tentacles so that it'll appear a little more smooth and not quite so harsh. If that makes any sense, it does to me. And of course here I'm just using the standard black Mod Podge to go over the XPS on both pieces. I said it's just a standard step and it seems to work. It improves the strength of the foam and also gives you your black base coat. Okay, in this step I'm just going to be using some Vallejo Surface Primer Black on the tentacles because Mod Podge doesn't really work too well on plastic, so I'm using an airbrush. You could use a rattle can if you want on this because the foam's pretty well protected with the Mod Podge, but still be careful with how close you spray. But for safety reason for the foam, I'm just going to go with the Vallejo and my airbrush. And while I got my airbrush out, or before I put everything away for it, I'm going to be using some Liquitex acrylic ink white to give all the tentacles a zenithal highlight, basically sprayed up top, kind of sprayed from above and down onto it, ends at a little bit of an angle. It helps with shadowing for when you go to paint next. And as you can see here, I've got my zenithal highlights all done. And of course here I'm just gonna paint over the surface of the tile itself black again, leaving the tentacles white. I want to start off with a black surface just because I wanted to have a darker appearance to the tile itself, not the tentacles. Of course, here I'm doing a pretty simple step. It's just a base coat of Apple Barrel's dark blue-gray. Use whatever color you want. That's just my go-to for base coat for stonework like this. Okay, this step can be skipped entirely if you don't want to do it. I'm just adding some streaks of color to the tiles. I'm adding Deco Arts True Ochre, Apple Barrel's Kelly Green, and Deco Arts Rookwood Red. Now, with this step, you do want to be careful if you are going to add the streaks of colors. Remember, these tiles are both the same, so you want to try and kind of get close to keeping the same streaks of colors in the same spots on both pieces. Because, again, they are supposed to be the same tile for gameplay. But of course, if you don't want to, you don't have to. Again, this is a step that can be skipped entirely if you want, but I just prefer it because I like the streaks of color that, while not prominent, can be seen in real life. Of course, in this step, I'm just going to go with the mid-tone color, basically an overbrush of about 80 to 85% coverage, leaving, the deepest recesses showing. I'm using Apple Barrel's Pewter Gray, but again, that's my choice of color. It doesn't have to necessarily be your choice of color. Of course, now I'm going to be using Apple Barrel's Granite Gray. It's a light gray that I'm going to dry brush on to hit all the highlights. Once again, these are just my color choices. They don't have to be yours. But again, this is my go-to for my third color or highlight color, and I'm dry brushing with a cheap makeup brush from the Dollar Tree. Of course, here I'm just adding my homemade wash. I have dark brown, just to give it that dirty, grungy, nasty look. Now, when I get to the tile with the tentacles on, I am trying to avoid getting any wash on the tentacles because I have a different color in mind for the tentacles, and you'll eventually see what that is. But for right now, I just am trying to get the dark brown wash on all the stone areas. Because again, I like the dark brown because it gives it like a grungy, dirty, nasty look, and it still hits up of all the recesses and shadows. Now that the wash has dried completely, I'm going to be hitting it again with the Apple Barrel Granite Gray and bringing up the edge highlighting and just get a light dry brush again and bring up all those edges and whatnot. Again, when I'm brushing the one with the tentacles, I'm purposely trying to avoid hitting the tentacles with the gray. Again, I have a different idea for the tentacles themselves, so gray is not going to be their color. Of course, now I'm hitting the bases of the tentacles with Citadel's Contrast Stormfiend. It's a blue. I just basically want to get it done real quick and easy. I am not a miniature painter by far, so I'm going to use contrast paint, speed paints, whatever shortcut I can, because I said I'm just not that good of a miniature painter, so definitely want to take shortcuts. If you want it, you can paint it however you want. These are just the colors I choose. So while I liked how the contrast paint turned out, it needed a little something, so I grabbed Apple Barrel's Blue Cotton. It's a light blue, and just wanted to highlight the edges of the bases of the tentacles, so it's basically more of a contrast between the recesses and the edges. Okay, unfortunately on this step I lost some footage, but it was just me using Citadel Colors Contrast Mantis Warriors Green on the tentacles. I thought it did a good job, and I was actually, once it was done and said and done, I was pretty happy with how they looked. So I just, again, all I used was Mantis Warriors Green from Citadel's Contrast line on the tentacles. Wow, I was really happy with how the tentacles were looking. They needed a little something. They had these little bumps and thorns or spikes on them that if I painted a light color would really make the tentacles pop, which is I'm just using Apple Barrel's Ivory to paint those thorns out.
Hey y'all, if you made it this far, it means you watched the whole thing, you made it to the end. I really do appreciate that. I do now have a Discord page. A link to it is in the About tab of my page. You can click on join if you want. You can give me video ideas. You can tell me how well I'm doing. You can tell me my videos suck if you want to. That's up to you. But I do hope to see you on the Discord page. Not a lot of tabs right now, but it will grow eventually, and more videos are going to be coming. So I hope you give me ideas. Otherwise, I'm going to just come up with my own in my head. And as always, remember the only person you got to worry about when making terrain is yourself, because you're making your terrain.